Hello and welcome to a Team Moray Robotics event recap. On August 30th and August 31st, yeah I know, I'm still so behind. Having so many robots is great, but there's a massive backlog of event recaps to do. But I'm dedicated to going in chronological order, at least for each individual robot, so you can see the gradual progression over time. I think I'll start skipping around a little bit though, to go through Moray's events a little sooner. Anyway, on August 30th and August 31st of 2025 now, I competed with my plastic ant-weight combat robot, Outpost 31, at RABID's Immersecon Invasion. As I went over in the Moray recap, Immersecon is a STEM and gaming convention that was held at a hotel where RABID got some space to set up a bit of a smaller event than usual. This was a rare 2-day event where day 1 was a double elimination tournament and day 2 was for grudge matches. The link to RABID's website is in the description if you want to learn more about them or support them, because they always put on fantastic events. Outpost 31 is a robot that was designed to be a simple, durable, and fun robot, and it was my first robot that immediately had success, going 2-2 at its first event. However, its second event didn't go so well at 1-2, with pretty disappointing losses. The losses were at least to 2 great robots, but the servo got pulled out too easily and the absurd forks were great at getting under people, but they were terrible at releasing them. To fix these issues, I melted the corner of the top plate to the chassis with a soldering iron to hold the servo in, and I dremeled off the barbs on the forks that made releasing so hard. Other than that, this was the exact same Outpost 31 as the previous events, and it was even the exact same chassis that fought beetles at the hive. I felt pretty good about my chances, and I was really hoping to redeem this bot after its disappointing last event. It needs to live up to the greatness of the Thing for its first RABID. Oh, and I also made this stupidly long lifter just because. My first fight was against Drody, a 2-wheel drive drum spinner from Team Tomaternator. This was a great first matchup because Drody is a good style of robot for Outpost to corral and control. It also helped that it had a wedge underneath its drum that should make it a lot easier for the forks to get under without worrying about the drum potentially doing damage. Unfortunately, Drody was barely functional going into this match, to the point where it seemed like almost a guaranteed win. When the fight starts, Outpost 31 quickly makes its way across the box and gently hugs its opponent. I get a little lift, and pushing down with the lifter also gets Drody off of its wheels. With Drody not really being any kind of a threat, I wanted to play around some and have a somewhat entertaining fight, but the forks are spaced far enough apart that the bendy TPU makes it so they just hug the sides of Drody and keep my lifter too far away to get under. This is how the rest of this short fight goes until Drody can't move at all and gets counted out. Well, robots were in the arena. It's a shame Drody didn't work properly. I never really want to win because my opponent's having severe issues, but in the moment I can't be too disappointed with an easy win. Moving on in the winner's bracket, Outpost 31 would fight my dad. That's right, it was Outpost 31 versus Sliceserve, and in case you didn't know, Sliceserve is a robot that I made for my dad, and actually the robot I most heavily based Outpost 31 off of. Obviously, this wouldn't be a damaging fight, and I knew Sliceserve was pretty bulletproof reliability-wise, so this would almost certainly go the full 2.5 minutes. I felt great about this matchup because Outpost 31 outreaches Sliceserve with its 200mm long forks. That's around 8 inches. The whole point of these forks was to make sure I never got outreached. Since both robots are made of the exact same parts, Sliceserve would have to outdrive Outpost 31 to win, and no offense, but I think I might be the better driver. I was hoping this would happen for a few events now. When the fight starts, I miss a box rush and then make sure the forks are pointed at Sliceserve. I get the upper hand due to reach and get the first lift. I get underneath again, but Outpost flips over. Sliceserve drives into the corner and I start to maintain full control, and then a very fun moment happens when Outpost 31 lifts Sliceserve in between its forks and plays with it some more using its lifter. Sliceserve goes in for an attack but gets stopped by Outpost's reach when he gets flipped and pinned. There was a lot of waggling and aggressive tapping here. Sliceserve gets flipped again and then briefly tries to spin around like a melty brain. Sliceserve manages to get a lift after getting to the side of Outpost 31, but it can't really do anything as long as Outpost forks are pointed at it. I chase Sliceserve down but get pinned after he got to the side of one of the forks. I get flipped again and then get back at Sliceserve for that pin by getting one myself.
5, 4, 3, 2.
A charge from Sliceserve causes it to ride up the forks and get flipped. Outpost 31 remains in control and uses the corner to its advantage because there's really no way for Slicer to get out when I have it corralled in there. After the release, I switch corners and pin him again. The final 10 seconds involve Outpost 31 controlling Slicer and getting one more lift and push into the wall. It seemed pretty clear, but Outpost 31 won that fight and was 2-0 in the winner's bracket. Even though it was only 2 fights, this was actually the longest I had ever lasted in the winner's bracket, undefeated. That was a very fun fight and definitely a battle of forks and driving. Outpost 31's crazy reach worked perfectly here as Slicer was rarely able to deal with those forks. Outpost's next opponent would be Ultraviolet, a robot that beat Slicer twice and the first robot at this event to potentially deal a lot of damage. It's a wide vert from the Leatherbacks team and it's very well driven, but I did have a reach advantage which gave me some hope that I could pull off an upset. When the fight starts, the forks get stuck on the floor, but I get underneath Ultraviolet and maintain control for a little while. His forks prevented me from getting a lift though. Ultraviolet gets to the side of the forks and pushes me around before flipping me and then continuing to drive very aggressively. This aggressive driving style makes it hard for me to regroup and face him like I need to. This hit was pretty fun as Ultraviolet hits one of Outpost's forks from the side, but the other one was underneath him, causing both robots to bounce around. I would have fully taken control of him, but the forks get caught on the floor, allowing him to get free. I get hit around against the wall, and then after this hit here, Outpost 31 suddenly stops moving, leading to another hit on the back. I couldn't get the robot to move at all, so Outpost 31 gets counted out and sent into the loser's bracket. That fight was mainly a showcase of Mitchell out-driving me and taking advantage of any driving mistakes. It's hard to always keep the forks pointed where I need them to be because they're so long that it takes more space and precision than most robots need to turn around and face the other robot head-on. What killed the robot was a hit on the back, exploding the FingerTech charge jack switch. It looks like these things are held together with the plastic pieces being press-fitted into each other, so it's not that surprising that a direct hit broke it. If I remember correctly, Mitchell, the driver of Ultraviolet, told me that he was trying to target this spot on the back of the robot. Other than the switch, the layers peeled apart some at the back, and the forks had Ultraviolet spinner rubbed off on them. Outpost 31 always comes home a little more colorful than it started. 2 screws also pulled out on the fork mounts. That was a little disappointing, but I had another chance in the loser's bracket. My next opponent was Ike, which is spelt with an exclamation mark, so I should probably keep yelling it, but I'm not going to. Ike is a full-body drum spinner where the whole middle of the robot is a big spinning drum. The builder of Ike has some very interesting videos that I recommend checking out. After Slicer fought him earlier in the day, I felt really good about this matchup because it had already been proven that a TPU forky control bot was great at preventing Ike from getting good hits. I thought that I could probably outdrive him since a full-body drum is probably not a very easy robot to control, and I could use the forks to keep his drum from getting many good hits off. When the fight starts, Ike skips off the forks and fails to get any bite on them as they slide underneath the drum. Ike is very bouncy.
So we have a very bouncy boy in Ike and a very bouncy chassis in Outpost 31. Something tells me this is going to be a very bouncy fight.
So it was going to be nearly impossible to pin him, so I chase him around and try to get more control in this way. The forks keep working and getting underneath of him where Ike really can't do anything. Outpost 31 takes Ike into the wall, but then gets hit on the wheel guard when I leave the side exposed. I get a good slam into the wall, and then Ike drives straight over me. The chase continues, and it may be very hard to maintain full control over Ike, but Outpost design prevents him from doing much of anything, and I would still say that I was in control of the fight. Running into Ike causes him to bounce around a bit. I keep trying to pin him, but he can just drive over Outpost. Here you can see I try to get a lift, but miss. After slamming Ike into the wall again, Outpost 31 briefly stops moving, but comes back to life quickly. Ike gets stomped by the forks, and then I get the best moment of control yet, when I scoop Ike up and then fling him into the wall using the lifter. At this point, I think I was pretty clearly winning, but Outpost 31 stops moving for another second. Right as Ike ramps over me, Outpost stops moving for an extended amount of time and I was about to get counted out. Hoping to somehow be reanimated, I asked my opponent to hit me, and it was incredibly nice of him to do so, especially since Ike's hit actually does bring Outpost 31 back to life and back into this fight. Ike might be Herbert West. I get the closest thing so far to a pin, proving that I was still in the fight. Ike goes crazy, bouncing off the floor after getting pushed into the corner.
Ike chooses to let the fight continue. And then dances because it's so happy about this fight continuing on.
Outpost dies momentarily, but moves again pretty fast.
Continuing on for the next 23 seconds.
Tragically, it stops moving again with barely any time left in the fight, and then gets counted out with less than 5 seconds left until it would have made it to a judge's decision.
8, 5, 7, 4, 6, 3, 5, 2, 1, and 3, not quite as lucky the second time. Match finish. Right.
This is a horrible way for the fight to end because I feel like I almost certainly would have won that decision because Outpost 31 prevented Ike from doing anything for almost the entire fight. The crazy thing is that Ike's previous fight ended the exact same way, with Aku dominating the fight and then suddenly losing power. The countout started with 13 seconds left, the exact same time that Outpost count started. There might be something sinister going on with Ike. The issue wasn't very clear even when I removed the top plate and started digging around inside. I put it in the test box and it worked just fine. This may have been a disappointing way to end the day, but I love that fight because there's something so fun about chasing my opponent down and trying to wrangle a crazy robot like Ike. And a big thank you to the driver of Ike for actually hitting me when I requested to be hit again. If I were him, I definitely wouldn't have done that. So that was really nice. If I remember correctly, I think he was saying that he was probably not going to, but eventually he decided, yeah, I'll do it. So great sportsmanship. Thank you for that. Also, Outpost made it far enough where it tied for 5th place at this event, which I'm super happy with, especially since that means it got some points on RCE. The fights were also pretty encouraging because even the final loss was a great showing for Outpost 31 up until the very end. This isn't the end though, because Outpost 31 came back for day 2 of Immersecon. If you missed the Moray video, what's wrong with you? But also I explained that day 2 was a small scale, very casual day where a few people came back and you could go around and just ask anyone if they wanted to have a grudge match. There were no stakes or anything, just fun fights. For Outpost's first fight, my dad and I decided to switch robots and see who was truly the better driver. So I would drive Sliceserve and he would drive Outpost. When the fight starts, Sliceserve charges up one of the forks and gets stuck until Outpost 31 releases. I almost get a lift on the side and then struggle against the long forks.
Alright, we got a classic control bot versus control bot fight here. Who can lift the other one harder?
I get an opening on the side, scoring a lift and a push across the box, including a brief pin. Sliceserve takes control again with another lift. I decide to spin around really fast because my dad always talks about doing that, and I'm not sure it really does much. The forks make it hard to get more control, and then Outpost 31 catches Sliceserve to pin it against the wall and lift it around. It switches to the corner, but then Outpost dies again like it did in the Ike fight, with Sliceserve stuck on its forks. After some wiggling, I free Sliceserve, and a bump is all it takes to get Outpost 31 back up and running. Sliceserve pulls ahead, but Outpost quickly fights back with a pin. For a while, Outpost 31 points the forks at Sliceserve, and I try to drive around him so I don't get stuck on the forks again. I succeed eventually and lift Outpost into the wall, where I start slapping it furiously because it's pretty funny. I quickly do it again and keep the aggressive tapping going, and then I don't know how, but we stick together and spin around before I can release. In the final 10 seconds, Sliceserve gets around to the back of its opponent to control some, before Outpost 31 starts spinning around to slap me with the forks. This is how the fight ends. Thomas called for a vote to see who the minimal crowd thought won the fight, and it was Sliceserve, even though I can't really hear anyone cheering for either of the robots in the recording.
Alright, good match. Who do we think Outpost won? Who thinks Sliceserve won? I think Sliceserve is the winner.
Well, that was another really fun fight, and I guess it settled who the better driver was since I won with both robots. Outpost stopped moving again like before, so I replaced the switch to see if that was the problem. It seemed like it probably was because I didn't have this issue again. Kinda weird that 2 switches in a row had a weird issue since I've never really had any issues with them before. The final fight for Outpost 31 was against Sparky, a robot that could switch from full combat to plastic by replacing the chunky metal spinner with a chunky plastic spinner. I fought him with Moray too, as you might remember, and he didn't have much ground game, so it should be pretty easy for Outpost to get underneath. When the fight starts, we run into each other and I chase him into the corner where Outpost gets a nice little lift. Sparky runs up the forks and into the lifter, and then I use the lifter to flip him onto his back where he vibrates around slowly. I remember someone saying, "He's doing the thing," and I thought, I am the thing. Since it's a grudge match, of course, I keep the fight going and right Sparky. After a push and lift, I start spinning around to see what would happen, then go right back to fighting normally. Outpost 31 gets another brief pin and lift. Here, Outpost brings the lifter down into Sparky's weapon, which doesn't do too much damage, fortunately. Sparky shows off some great driving before getting pinned. Another small lift occurs, and then I run Sparky into the wall and slap him. Outpost flips Sparky just off screen, and his weapon bounces off my fork to self-right him. Sparky grinds at the side of the forks a little bit, but doesn't get much bite. A good lift helps me scoop my opponent up and deliver him into the wall. There's another lift and then one that causes Sparky to do a full 360 flip. Outpost 31 rams Sparky's spinner first into the kick plate, which I think gets his little fork stuck underneath of it. The forks are so long that I can just back up with Sparky sitting on them and then he gets flipped again, but manages to self-right using his own spinner. He does this again after another flip from Outpost. The fight ends with some spinning and Outpost lifter is perfectly timed with the clapping. I love this so much I made it into a GIF. So that was a very fun fight. It was a great showcase for Outpost 31's drive and lifter, as I was able to chase my opponent around the box and use the lifter to really affect the outcome of the fight. Overall, this was a very satisfying event for Outpost 31 and proved that it's a pretty consistent robot. I didn't beat the strongest opponents, but I put up a great fight against the eventual 4th place bot, and I was really happy with this event. The only thing I planned on changing was switching to Roach Robotics wheels to get better traction, and switching to the little white blocky fingertech switches. I would even use the same exact chassis again because it still works. Thank you for watching this event recap for Outpost 31.